Alright, we just got our water to 170 here for our sparging. So let's go ahead and take that and pour it over this grain here. And that will finish off our extraction of the grain. And then we can get on to what you may more normally recognize just with our just like a normal boil like we would do with an extract brew. So we're going to do kind of the same thing we did just like with the first batch off of this, and go ahead and run this through a few times. You'll notice the water on top looks very clear, but when it comes out the bottom it's looking much more like liquid we got off here the first time. We're going to do this a few times until the liquid comes out looking a little bit more even, and it's going to be lighter colored than the first batch that we got. You do want to be careful not to over sparge when you start pulling out some of the tannins in the grain, and it gives you kind of an astringent flavor. That can also happen if the water you're using to sparge is too hot, so make sure you don't go over 170. Right. We'll go ahead and drain this into our brew pot. And hopefully what we end up with here is about 2.5 gallons of liquid total. Alright, we got all of our liquid drained out of our cooler into our brew pot and the heat on underneath of that. As you can see, we did get about 2.5 gallons there. So now we're just bringing this to a boil, and once we have this at a boil, we're going to go ahead and add the rest of our malt extract and our hops. Also, if you have a thin bottom kettle like this one here, make sure that you're stirring frequently so you don't scorch sugar to the bottom. Alright, we've got our extract at a full boil now, and we're going to go ahead and pour in our store-bought malt extract. In this case, we're using a Bryce Golden Light. And we're going to put in 4 pounds total. Of course, you can use any brand. Bryce is just the brand actually that the lady at the store picked for me. Here we go. I usually try to pour this in fairly slow while stirring the whole time. That way you run a little less risk of boiling over and burning sugar to the bottom as well. Make sure to get all of that in there. It does get a little bit sticky. Once it hits the steam coming up from the pot, it all starts to stick together. The other thing we're going to stir in right now is our boiling hops. The original recipe for this beer calls for a northern brewer as our boiling hops. In this case, I'm actually going to use a Fuggle hop. This is what I'm using. These are nice fresh hops that I got from my friend just recently. He grew these in his garden. So for the boil, we're using a Fuggle, like I said, and for the rest of it, we're going to use a Cascade. These are actually sort of a mix. His plants got mixed up, and so this bag is mostly Fuggle. That one is mostly Cascade, but there's a little bit of both in each of them. So here's those. Like I said, nice fresh hops. And usually I use a straining bag, but in this case, with this type of hop, I go ahead and pour them in just straight, and then I'll later strain those out before it goes in the fermenter. Let's get those in there, and get this boiling again. It's going to boil for about 45 minutes, and then we'll put our next batch of ingredients in. We're going to go ahead and add a 1/4 teaspoon of Irish moss. I'll put that in, give it a stir. And we're also going to add our flavoring hops. And in here I have about ½ ounce of Saz hops, which the original recipe calls for. And then I also have about ½ ounce of the Fuggle hops that I showed you earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and dump that in. The Saz hops that I added are actually a pellet hop. And again, with those, I usually actually do put a pellet hop in a straining bag, so it's a little bit easier to deal with once you're transferring it to the fermenter. But in this case, I'm dumping it right in, since I'm going to strain out all those big fresh leafy hops anyhow. Doesn't make a difference. Anyways, we're going to boil this for another 15 minutes, and then we're going to add our final flavoring ingredients, our last hops, and the coriander. Alright, our 15-minute boil has finished up, and we're going to go ahead and put in the last of our hops. I'm just using a mix of the Cascade and the Fuggle hops. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and pour these in. And again, I've turned the heat off at this point. These are just going in for a short steep before we pour this in our fermenter. There's that. And that was just 1 ounce, just a half and half mix of Cascade and Fuggle. So stir those in. And our coriander, 1 ounce of ground coriander. Dump that in as well. Give it a stir. Ooh, oh man, that smells really good. Alright, this is going to steep for 3 minutes, and then we're going to pour it into our fermenter. That's steeped for 3 minutes now. And we're going to go ahead and strain it into the fermenter. The fermenter has about a gallon of cold water in it already. Trying not to burn anybody here. Sorry.
Too bad.
Alrighty. That is that. Now we're just gonna go ahead and top this off to 5 gallons and see where the temperature's at. If it's cool enough, we'll go ahead and pitch the yeast. If not, we'll let it cool till morning and we'll get it at that point. Let's pour this in and that'll be that for tonight.